Peace be upon you, dear brothers and sisters. There was once a shepherd whose story teaches us that true wealth is not measured in possessions but in patience, faith, and the purity of one's heart. His life was simple. He owned only 3 sheep and a humble home, but his trust in God turned that simplicity into something extraordinary. It is said that when a person sets out with sincerity and reliance on the Almighty, even the smallest journey becomes a path of divine purpose. When the old shepherd was on his deathbed, he called for his 2 children, a son and a daughter, and said softly, "My beloved children, I have nothing to leave you but this small house and my 3 sheep. Divide them as you wish, but promise me one thing: never let greed divide your hearts." The daughter chose the small home, saying she could live there peacefully. The son smiled and agreed, taking the 3 sheep and setting out into the world to seek his sustenance, praying that God would bless his steps and guide his fortune. For a long time, his journey brought no success. He walked from village to village, sleeping under the stars, drinking milk from his sheep, and surviving on whatever he could sell. Yet in his heart, he never complained. One afternoon, as he sat at a crossroads thinking deeply about his fate, a strange man approached him. The man had 3 large black dogs by his side, each one more powerful looking than the other. "Peace be upon you, shepherd," the stranger said. "I see you have 3 fine sheep. Let us make an exchange. Give me your sheep and I will give you my dogs." The young shepherd was puzzled. "What would I do with dogs?" he asked. "My sheep feed themselves and give me milk, but dogs eat, and I have nothing to feed them. I have no farm to guard, no land to protect." The stranger smiled. "These are not ordinary dogs," he said. "They are gifts unlike anything in this world. The smallest one is named Sim. Whenever you are hungry, simply call his name, and by the will of God, he will bring you a table full of food. The middle one, Arslan, will protect you from all harm, and the largest one, Sesur, is so strong that he can bite through iron itself." Hearing this, the shepherd felt a stirring of faith within him. He trusted that perhaps this meeting was not by chance. He agreed, gave the man his 3 sheep, and received the dogs in return. To test the truth of the man's words, he called softly, "Sim, I am hungry." In an instant, the little dog disappeared and soon returned carrying a great basket filled with delicious food and drink. The shepherd smiled with gratitude and praised God, realizing his fortune had indeed changed. Days passed, and he walked with his 3 loyal companions, feeling lighter in spirit. One evening, he reached a quiet road where a black carriage approached, drawn by 2 black horses draped in dark veils. Inside sat a young woman dressed in mourning, her eyes full of tears. Even the horses seemed burdened by sorrow, their heads lowered as they moved. The shepherd stepped forward and asked the driver, "Why such sadness? What has happened?" At first, the driver said nothing. But when the shepherd repeated his question, the man replied, "A great calamity has befallen this land. A monstrous creature lives in the mountains beyond. It has the body of a serpent, wings like a dragon, and fiery breath. Each year, 1 young maiden must be offered as a sacrifice to appease it. This year, it is the Sultan's own daughter, the girl you see before you." The shepherd's heart trembled at the thought. How could such injustice continue while he stood idly by? Without hesitation, he followed the carriage until it stopped at the foot of the mountain. The princess stepped out, walking slowly toward her fate. Tears streaming down her face, the shepherd ignored the driver's warning to stay away. "If you value your life, do not follow her," the man said. But the shepherd answered, "Her life is precious and so is mine, for both belong to God." He followed her into the dark valley, where soon a monstrous roar filled the air. From the shadows emerged the creature, a horrifying beast, half serpent and half dragon, its eyes burning like coals, its teeth sharp as blades. Flames burst from its mouth as it descended upon the helpless girl, but the shepherd was already calling out, "Arslan! Go, my brave one! Protect her!" With a thunderous growl, the dog leaped at the beast. The two clashed violently, claws against teeth, fire against courage. The ground shook beneath them. When the dust settled, the creature lay slain, and the only trace left were its two great fangs gleaming on the ground. The princess had fainted from fear, and the shepherd gently carried her to safety. When she awoke, she saw the man who had saved her life and wept with joy. "You have not only saved me," she said, "but all the daughters of this land. Please come with me to my father's palace. He will reward you with treasures beyond measure." But the shepherd, humble as ever, shook his head. "I did only what was right," he said. "I must continue my journey. I promised myself to travel for 3 years, to see the world and learn its lessons. After that time, I will return to see you again." The princess respected his resolve. She returned to the capital in her carriage, while the shepherd walked on with his 3 faithful companions. What she did not know was that the driver who had guided her, the same man who had warned the shepherd, was driven by greed and jealousy. When they reached the bridge near the palace, the driver stopped and said, "Your rescuer is gone. No one knows who he is. Tell your father that I was the one who killed the beast and saved your life. He will reward me greatly. If you refuse, I will throw you into the river and everyone will believe the monster devoured you." Horrified and helpless, the princess agreed out of fear, but she swore silently never to marry such a man. When they arrived at the palace, the king and queen rejoiced, embracing their daughter with tears of happiness. The false hero was honored, celebrated, and promised the princess's hand in marriage. Yet the true savior of the kingdom walked far away, unaware of the deception that awaited his return. Dear listeners, before we continue this story, let me take a moment to speak to your hearts. If you are finding peace and reflection in this tale, I kindly ask you, please subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and like this video. It helps this message reach others who may need a reminder of patience, trust, and divine justice. May your support be a form of sadaqah, a good deed that spreads light and wisdom. And so, the shepherd's journey continued. For 3 long years, he traveled through deserts and forests, guided by faith and protected by his loyal dogs. Meanwhile, in the royal palace, the princess lived with a heavy heart. She begged her father again and again to delay the wedding, saying she was not yet ready. The king, out of love for his daughter, agreed once, then twice, then a 3rd time. Each year, she hoped that the true hero would return, just as he had promised. When the 3rd year came to its end, the city prepared for the grand wedding. Lights decorated the streets, music filled the air, and the people rejoiced for their beloved princess. But on that very day, as fate would have it, a young traveler entered the capital, accompanied by 3 black dogs. He was the shepherd. As the young shepherd entered the city, he was surprised to see it covered in decorations and filled with the scent of joyful music. Everywhere he looked, people were laughing, dancing, and preparing for what seemed to be a great celebration. Curious, he stopped a passerby and asked, "What is this celebration for?" The man smiled and said, "Our beloved princess is getting married tonight. She will wed the brave man who saved her from the monstrous creature 3 years ago." The shepherd froze in disbelief. He realized at once that the supposed hero could only be the deceitful coachman. A fire of injustice burned within his heart, but he remained calm. "This cannot be," he whispered to himself. "The truth has been buried beneath lies, but Allah knows the secrets hidden in every heart." He tried to speak to the townspeople, to tell them the truth, yet no one believed him. They had all accepted the story of the coachman as fact. The guards soon seized the shepherd and, thinking he was a troublemaker trying to disrupt the wedding, threw him into the palace dungeon. The dark cell was cold and damp, and the shepherd sat upon a pile of straw, praying for guidance. His loyal dogs waited faithfully outside the prison walls, howling in sorrow for their master. Finally, the shepherd called out softly, "Sesur, my strong one, come and help me." Within moments, the great black dog appeared at the window. With its mighty jaws, it bit through the iron bars one by one until the window stood open. The shepherd climbed out, thanking God for this deliverance, and together with his 3 dogs, he disappeared into the night. Meanwhile, the palace shone with golden lights. The princess, dressed in silk and jewels, sat quietly beside the king and queen. Though surrounded by music and laughter, her eyes were full of sorrow. The coachman stood proudly at the king's side, receiving endless praise as the hero who had saved the kingdom. Yet in her heart, the princess prayed silently that the truth would be revealed before the day ended. Outside, the shepherd was determined to uncover that truth himself. He called to Simsim, "My dear Simsim, bring me food, for I must gather my strength." The little dog disappeared and soon returned with a beautiful golden cloth embroidered with the royal crown. Upon it were placed all kinds of delicious dishes, the same ones prepared for the royal banquet. The shepherd smiled. This was a sign. He knew now that the power of faith was with him. At that very moment, Arslan, the middle dog, ran swiftly into the palace hall. The guards tried to stop him, but he moved with purpose. He walked directly to the princess, sat at her feet, and gently licked her hand. The room fell silent. The princess looked down and gasped. She recognized him instantly. This was the same brave dog that had fought the serpent 3 years before. Tears welled in her eyes. "This is Arslan," she whispered. "This is the companion of the true hero who saved me." The king, surprised, asked, "What do you mean, my daughter?" And so the princess rose from her seat and addressed everyone in the great hall. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew strong with truth. "My father, my mother, and all who are present here," she said, "you have been told a lie. This man standing beside you is not my savior. The real hero is a humble shepherd who followed me to the mountain and risked his life to fight the beast. With his faithful dog Arslan, he destroyed the monster and saved me from death. This man beside you," she pointed at the coachman, "was the one who threatened to throw me into the river if I told you the truth. I was too afraid then to speak, but today I can no longer stay silent." The crowd gasped in shock. The king's face darkened with anger, and the false hero began to tremble. "Is this true?" the king demanded. The coachman fell to his knees, stammering and begging for mercy. But before anyone could speak further, Arslan barked once and ran to the door, guiding the soldiers outside. Moments later, they returned with the shepherd himself, who walked into the hall with quiet dignity, followed by his 2 other dogs. The moment the princess saw him, she smiled through her tears. "You kept your promise," she said softly. "You returned after 3 years." The shepherd bowed respectfully to the king and queen. "I did what my heart commanded," he said. "I only did what was right in the eyes of God." The entire hall erupted in applause and praise. The king stood and embraced the shepherd. "You have saved not only my daughter, but my entire kingdom," he said. "You showed courage, humility, and loyalty. Whatever reward you desire shall be yours." The shepherd shook his head. "I seek no reward, my lord. My heart is at peace knowing that truth has prevailed." But the princess, her voice gentle yet firm, spoke again. "Father, if it pleases you, there is no greater reward than to honor such a man with love and respect. Let his name be remembered as the one who freed us all from fear." The king nodded solemnly. "Then it shall be so." He ordered the guards to remove the false hero from the palace. The coachman was stripped of his title and sent away in disgrace. The shepherd, once poor and forgotten, was now honored in the eyes of all. Yet even as he stood among the noblemen and the lights of the palace, he felt no pride, only gratitude. For he knew that every blessing came from the will of Allah, who raises the humble and humbles the proud. Soon after, the princess and the shepherd were married in a ceremony filled with joy and prayers. The kingdom celebrated not only their union but the victory of truth over deceit. The feast lasted for many days, and every guest was reminded that honesty, faith, and patience always lead to honor in the end. But even in his happiness, the shepherd did not forget his sister, who still lived alone in their small house. He sent for her with gifts of beautiful clothes and precious jewelry, inviting her to the palace. When she arrived, the princess welcomed her with open arms, and the two women embraced like old friends. The shepherd wept tears of joy as he reunited with his beloved sister, grateful that Allah had granted him both worldly happiness and the peace of family. And then something miraculous happened. The three dogs stood together before him. One of them, Simsim, spoke in a voice soft as the wind. "Our mission is complete, dear master. We were sent only to test your faith, your courage, and your loyalty. You remained grateful even in hardship and remembered your sister even in your time of joy. Now, you have fulfilled your purpose." As the shepherd and the princess watched in awe, the three dogs began to rise into the air. Their bodies shimmered with light, and before anyone could speak, they transformed into three radiant birds, spreading their wings toward the heavens. The shepherd lifted his hands in prayer, thanking Allah for the mercy and wonders he had shown. The years passed, and the couple lived in peace, ruling the land with justice and compassion. Their story became a reminder to all who heard it, that true wealth lies not in gold or power, but in faith, truth, and gratitude. And somewhere, high in the skies above their kingdom, three shining birds still circled in the sunlight, as if watching over the shepherd who once began his journey with only 3 sheep and a trusting heart. Thus ends the story, a tale of patience, loyalty, and divine justice. May we all remember, dear brothers and sisters, that every test we face is a chance to prove our trust in Allah, and that even the smallest act done with sincerity can open the gates of mercy and blessing. Long after the days of trial and triumph had passed, the story of the shepherd and his 3 loyal companions became a legend whispered across valleys and sung by wandering poets. In every village, parents told their children about the poor young man who trusted God more than his own strength, and about how his patience turned despair into glory. But to those who looked deeper, it was never merely a tale of miracles and talking dogs. It was a lesson about faith, humility, and the unseen ways in which the Almighty guides his servants. The shepherd, now living in peace with his wife, the princess, never allowed comfort to make him forget gratitude. Every morning before the palace awoke, he would walk into the garden to pray beneath an old olive tree. He would thank Allah for another day of life, another chance to be useful, and for the strength that had carried him through hunger, danger, and loneliness. Those who saw him from afar said that even after becoming a ruler, he looked as humble as the shepherd he once was. He still spoke gently to the servants, visited the poor, and treated his animals with kindness. For he knew that power is not a crown placed on the head, but a responsibility placed upon the heart. The princess too found peace in her husband's simplicity. Though she had grown up among silk curtains and golden halls, she learned that happiness was not born from wealth, but from sincerity. Together they opened new wells for the villages that once suffered from drought. They built schools where children could learn to read the words of the Quran and understand the meaning of gratitude. The people of the land began to call them the rulers with a shepherd's heart. One day, as they sat in the garden, the princess asked softly, "My beloved, tell me the truth. Were you never angry that your reward was stolen, that lies almost erased your name?" The shepherd smiled, looking at the sky. "No," he said, "for I learned long ago that truth is not a treasure that can be taken. It is a light that belongs to God, and it shines when the time is right. The world may hide it for a while, but it cannot destroy it. I never fought for a reward. I fought because a soul was in need. And when you do something for Allah's sake, no human tongue can take it away." His words touched her deeply. She realized that the man she had married was not just brave, but truly wise. A man whose heart was anchored in faith, not pride. They spent many evenings speaking about the meaning of patience and trust, and each night they ended their talks with prayer. But time, as always, moved on. The shepherd grew older, his hair turning white, yet his eyes never lost the quiet strength of one who has seen both hardship and mercy. He often thought about his sister, who lived in comfort now but still preferred the little house where their father had once spoken his final words. He visited her often, bringing gifts, but she always said, "Your visits are my greatest treasure. The world has given you a crown, but I see the same humble brother who once shared his last piece of bread." In his later years, the shepherd would often sit alone at night, gazing at the stars. Sometimes high above, 3 bright birds could be seen circling the moon. People said they were the spirits of Simsim, Arslan, and Sesur, the faithful companions who had guided him through every trial. Whenever he saw them, the shepherd would whisper, "You reminded me that Allah's help comes in many forms, sometimes as friends, sometimes as trials, and sometimes as silence that teaches the heart to wait." As the years passed, the land grew prosperous. Peace replaced fear, and kindness replaced greed. The kingdom was known across distant lands for its justice. Travelers who came seeking wisdom were told, "Here rules a man who began with 3 sheep and a prayer." Scholars wrote books about his story, using it as a lesson for rulers who had forgotten humility. And yet the shepherd himself would say, "I am only a servant. If people remember my name, let it be as one who trusted God, not as one who conquered the world." When his time of departure came, the shepherd felt no fear. He gathered his family and close friends, including his sister, who now had grandchildren of her own. His voice was soft but clear. "Everything in life," he said, "returns to the one who gave it. We come to this world with nothing and leave with nothing except the deeds we carry in our hearts. Never measure your worth by what you own or by how others see you. Measure it by how you trust Allah when all seems lost." The princess wept quietly beside him, holding his hand. "Your journey began with 3 sheep," she said, "and it ends with a kingdom. But more than that, it ends with peace." The shepherd smiled faintly. "No," he said, "it ends with gratitude." And with that final word, his soul returned to the Lord who had written his story with mercy from beginning to end. After his passing, the people of the land built a small garden around the olive tree where he used to pray. They called it the Garden of Trust. Every traveler who came through the kingdom stopped there to rest, to pray, or to reflect on the story of the shepherd. Some said that on calm nights when the wind moved through the branches, one could hear the faint echo of 3Ds barking in the distance, or perhaps the fluttering of wings high above as 3 birds soared through the silver moonlight. Generations came and went, but the lesson remained. Faith without trust is like a journey without direction. Patience without gratitude is like a field without rain. The shepherd's story was told not just as a miracle, but as a reminder that divine help often hides behind ordinary moments. A stranger at a crossroads, a trade that seems foolish, a challenge that feels impossible. Each may be a door through which Allah opens our destiny. And so, dear brothers and sisters, as we end this story, remember what it teaches, that whatever your circumstance, whether rich or poor, strong or weak, your greatest treasure is not in your hand, but in your heart. Do not fear the unknown, for the one who guided the shepherd through mountains and monsters is the same who guides you through your trials. Be patient, be truthful, and never forget to be grateful. For when you trust in Allah completely, even the smallest act of faith can turn into a miracle that outlives your name. And perhaps somewhere beyond the reach of time, the shepherd and his princess still walk through the eternal gardens of peace, their hearts light and free while 3 shining birds circle above them, symbols of loyalty, courage, and divine mercy, reminding all who look up that faith is never forgotten and gratitude never dies. Centuries passed, yet the legend of the humble shepherd endured. In the marketplaces, the storytellers would raise their voices beneath the setting sun, drawing circles of people around them, from gray-haired elders to children with wide eyes. Once, they would begin. There was a man who owned nothing but faith, and because of that, he gained everything. The tale no longer belonged to one family or one land. It had become a mirror in which every believer could see themselves. Travelers from distant kingdoms carried it beyond mountains and seas. Some called it the shepherd and the 3 dogs, others the tale of divine trust, but the message never changed. It taught that when a person gives up fear, relies on the Creator, and does good without seeking reward, life itself becomes a form of worship. Scholars quoted it in sermons, poets turned it into verses, and teachers recited it to remind their students that the smallest act done sincerely could outweigh the grandest deed done for pride. In one such city, far from the shepherd's homeland, a poor weaver named Idris would listen to this story every Friday evening. He had little, just his loom, his hands, and the faith that one day his work would feed his family. One night, as he finished his prayers, he whispered, "Doo-doo, O Lord, grant me the patience of that shepherd and the courage to trust you when I see no path ahead." The next day, his fortunes began to shift. A merchant noticed his humble stall and offered him work. Step by step, blessing by blessing, his life unfolded as though the old legend had come alive once more. Thus, the story continued to breathe through the hearts of believers. It reminded them that miracles do not belong only to prophets or saints. They belong to anyone who walks in sincerity and trusts in the unseen. It reminded rulers that wealth and authority are only temporary trusts, not trophies. It reminded the poor that dignity lies not in gold, but in the steadiness of a grateful heart. In time, a wise scholar was asked to explain why the story of the shepherd touched so many souls. He smiled and said, "Because it is not merely a story. It is a reflection of the Quranic truth that whoever relies upon Allah, He is sufficient for him. The dogs in the tale are not just animals. They are signs. Simsim represents provision. Arslan represents protection, and Sisur represents strength. Together they remind us that sustenance, safety, and power all come from one source, the Lord of the worlds. Generations later, a great mosque was built near the site once known as the Garden of Trust. Its marble walls were carved with verses about patience, gratitude, and faith. On the main gate, an inscription read, "He who trusts in Allah will never be left alone." Every year, pilgrims came there to pray for courage in their trials. Some sought healing, others forgiveness, and others simply peace of heart. Many said that at dawn, when the first light touched the minaret, 3 birds could still be seen circling the sky above. Bright shapes glowing like stars against the morning blue. Among the visitors was a young mother who carried her sleeping child. She knelt by the old olive tree and whispered, "My Lord, I fear the future. The world is uncertain. Give me faith like the shepherds." When she lifted her eyes, a feather fell beside her, a small, dark feather glimmering with golden light. She smiled, took it as a sign, and walked away with renewed hope. And so the legend kept growing, not as a distant fairy tale, but as a living reminder. People said the shepherd's spirit still walked among those who faced hardship with patience. Whenever someone chose honesty over deceit, kindness over anger, or faith over fear, it was as if his story began again through them. In one sermon, an old imam summarized the lesson beautifully. The shepherd's greatest miracle was not the dogs or the defeat of the monster. It was that he remembered his sister even at the height of his happiness. That is the true test of the believer. To remain humble when blessed, just as you remain patient when tried. His congregation wept softly, for each of them had known moments when gratitude had been forgotten amid comfort. Dear brothers and sisters, if you carry anything from this tale into your own life, let it be this. Never let prosperity make you forget compassion, and never let hardship make you forget hope. The same God who lifted the shepherd from the dust of the road to the light of honor still watches over every heart that trusts him. The trials you face are not punishments. They are invitations to grow closer to the one who knows your pain better than you do. When night falls and doubt whispers, remember the shepherd praying beneath his olive tree, whispering gratitude even when he had nothing. Remember his patience when he was alone and his humility when the world celebrated him. Remember that every gift you have is a trust and every loss a lesson. And when you find yourself standing at a crossroads, uncertain which way to go, think of the moment when a weary traveler traded his 3 sheep for 3 unknown companions. To others it looked like folly. To him it was faith. He did not yet see the path, but he knew the guide. Such trust turns ordinary lives into extraordinary journeys. It transforms loneliness into prayer, failure into wisdom, and endings into new beginnings. It is the essence of Tawakkul, reliance upon the Almighty, pure and unwavering. And so, the story of the shepherd will never end, for it is not bound by time. It lives in every believer who chooses trust over fear, humility over pride, and patience over haste. When you face trials, remember him. When blessings come, thank as he thanked. And one day, perhaps unseen, 3 radiant wings will pass above your path, whispering the same message that guided him. Trust in Allah, and you will never walk alone. Through the centuries that followed, the shepherd's story continued to shine like a lantern in the hearts of believers. It was not merely a tale to entertain the mind, but a mirror reflecting the eternal truth of the human soul, that faith is not measured by wealth or fame, but by how deeply we trust when everything else seems lost. The scholars, poets, and preachers who told the story often said, "In every age a new shepherd is born, someone who learns to surrender his fear and walk the path of patience." In distant lands, people built small schools and libraries near the mosques where the legend was recited. On the walls, calligraphers painted verses that echoed its wisdom. Indeed, with hardship comes ease. Children would sit in circles, listening with wonder as their teachers described the young man who once walked alone with 3 diz and an unshakable heart. Some of them dreamed of growing into people like him, humble yet courageous, poor in possessions yet rich in gratitude. But the story was not only for the young, it was a comfort to the old too. Elders who had lost their health or their loved ones found peace in remembering that God never abandons those who rely on him. They would whisper in their prayers, "O Lord, you gave strength to a lonely shepherd. Give us also the patience to accept your will." And sometimes when a gentle breeze passed through the leaves outside, They believed it was the same wind that once carried the shepherd's voice as he prayed under his olive tree. Even rulers and scholars began to reflect on the message behind his life. One sultan, famous for his wealth, was said to have spent a sleepless night thinking about the tale. He wrote in his diary, "I have palaces and armies, yet I envy that poor man's peace. His kingdom was not built of gold but of trust, and trust is a treasure no thief can steal." From that night onward, he changed the way he ruled, with mercy instead of pride, with humility instead of vanity. In the centuries that followed, pilgrims still visited the Garden of Trust where the olive tree stood. It was said that the air there smelled faintly of milk and earth, like the shepherd's first morning with his sheep. At dawn, birds still circled above the tree, 3 bright shapes moving gracefully together. Many travelers swore that if one prayed beneath its branches with a pure heart, something within them would change. Some left the garden with peace after years of grief. Others found courage to forgive those who had wronged them. One such traveler was a scholar from a faraway land. He came not seeking wealth or fame, but understanding. After praying beneath the tree, he wrote, "The shepherd's 3 dogs are not only companions, they are symbols of life's 3 blessings: sustenance that appears when we least expect it, protection when we fear, and strength when we are weak. Whoever trusts in God receives all 3, even if he begins his journey with nothing but faith." His words spread through the world of learning, reminding people that spiritual truth often hides in simple stories. The shepherd's name, once forgotten, no longer mattered. What endured was his example, how he met every test with patience, how he refused to return evil with evil, and how he remembered his sister even in his time of joy. That was the heart of his legacy. He showed that faith is not just believing in God's power, but living as though that power is always present. Even when unseen, there were many who said that the 3 birds which had once been his dogs still appeared at special moments in history, whenever truth was nearly forgotten, or when a humble heart was about to give up. They would circle quietly above, unseen by most, as a reminder that the mercy of Allah never departs from those who remember him. And though no one could prove such tales, believers smiled when they heard them, for faith does not need proof, only remembrance. One winter night, an old dervish told his students around the fire, "Do you know why the shepherd's story never fades? Because it is every believer's journey. Each of us begins with our 3 sheep, our small means, our simple dreams, our few blessings. And along the road we are tested. Some will trade their sheep for faith as the shepherd did and find treasures beyond imagination. Others will cling to the pasture and never see the mountain. The choice belongs to the heart." His words lingered in the cold air like a prayer whispered to the stars. And so, dear brothers and sisters, when you feel lost, remember this tale. When the road is long and the world seems silent, think of the young shepherd walking alone beneath the sky, trusting not in what he saw, but in the one who saw him. Think of his patience when he had nothing, and his humility when he had everything. Remember how he shared his blessings, how he forgave deceit, and how he never let pride dim the light of gratitude. For in truth, the story of the shepherd is not about miracles of dogs or dragons. It is about the quiet miracle that happens inside a believer's heart when it refuses to give up hope. It is about the moment you whisper, "I trust you, my Lord," and the universe itself seems to answer, "Then you are never alone." The story ends where every soul's story begins, in surrender. The shepherd's journey, like all journeys, was not toward riches or power, but toward peace. And peace, as every heart knows, comes not from owning much, but from needing little and thanking much. May we too walk with that same trust. May our faith be steadfast in trial and humble in blessing. And may every prayer we whisper rise like those three bright birds, carrying our hopes, our gratitude, and our devotion into the endless mercy of the sky. And when our days end, may people remember us not for what we built or gathered, but for how we believed, as a shepherd once believed, with a heart full of patience, a soul full of gratitude, and a trust that never wavered.